What is up, knuckleheads? Welcome to today's video. I got a question for you. Do you want to catch more fish this summer? Well, hang around where I'm going to give you the 411 on how to get it done.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so listen, guys, welcome to today's video where I'm out here in my workshop sweating. Yeah, sweating like stole something. So here's the deal. I am going to tell you about the top 3 presentations for me for catching fish in the summer. But first, let me get that baseball bat out of the way. I was about to step on that thing right there and break my neck. So look, this is the workshop. And I don't ever bring you guys videos from out here. I was out here getting ready for the trip I'm about to go on for 2 weeks. And I thought, dude, why are you not showing this stuff? Like literally, this is the most important stuff. And so actually yesterday I saw a video and I called my buddy Gene Jensen. You guys know Flukemaster. I said, man, I see that you just did this August video. And so what I'll do is I'll link that video up in the description box. I'm like, man, I agree with you on a couple of things, but there's a couple of things that I just think that you missed the mark. So do you have a problem with me doing a video and saying, here's where I agree, here's where I disagree? And he's like, nah, man, go for it. Here's what's happened. I reached out to Gene and I said, dude, we got all these YouTubers doing videos where we're just showing and telling the lures, not like showing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start collabing and we're going to hold each other accountable for, if we do a video about how to do something, follow it up with a video doing it or do it in the video. But I really felt like it was important to get this video out to you guys because if I don't, it's going to be a minute. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to you about 3 presentations or 3 lures or 3 lure types that I just absolutely crush them on in the late summer all the way into early fall. Now, if you catch me on the water and you ask me, hey man, do you got your jerkbait box? And I don't have this box, I will buy you dinner because I always have this box. And a lot of people are going to say, you have a jerkbait box? Dude, it's not cold. Okay, there's my jerkbait box. I got them in all sizes, pretty much all brands. I'm becoming a really big fan of the EBS technology from Livingston, especially when it comes to slowing down and letting that lure sit in place. So I'm going to start the video off talking about what Gene said he would do and where I agree and where I disagree. Now, I am not going to lie. I am a big frog fan, and not just in the slop, but he actually said he prefers the popping frog over the pointed nose frog. Now, I'm going to tell you where I differ. I like to hold on to all of my old crankbaits, and when my crankbaits just get so beat up that I can't repaint them, I can't repurpose them, I like to cut them in half with a hacksaw. And then I get the BBs out of them and I put them in the back of these frogs. And what it does is it makes it sit up a little nose high. It also gives it a little bit of rattling because the beads click on the hook on the inside. And when you tie it with a loop knot like that, which by the way, I've already done a video on that. I'll link that up on how to tie the loop knot. It really makes this thing set up nose high. And when you pop it or you twitch it, it walks. So even though I do like stick baits, I like stick baits more in open water. So in the summertime, especially early, we're going to talk about my STD approach, shallow to deep. If you want to catch them, go shallow to deep. That's literally the formula for summertime success, all the way again up into the fall. But that loop knot is critical if you're going to fish this lure. And I really think that the pointed nose frogs with a bunch of modifications is my favorite. In other words, I actually throw it at night. You can throw it up close to the bank. You don't have to worry about it getting hung up. You don't got to worry about it getting hung up in trees because it's pretty weedless. You don't have to worry about it getting hung up on wood. So I prefer this over a treble hook style bait. Now, if I've got a clean bank or if the fishing's a little slower, what I talked about with the jerk bait is in the summertime, I call a jerk bait a jake bait. Yep, a jake bait. And the reason I call it that is I like the little shorter brim or a shorter bill. And I'll even take a Dremel tool and Dremel off even more to make it super shallow. And I tie it off and I hold my rod tip up and reel it. And honestly, all I do is reel and stop and it wakes and comes back to the surface. That's all the action you need. So as long as you can get away with throwing a treble hook style bait, try a jake bait. You're going to absolutely freaking smash them shallow. Now, let me tell you a little tip about that. I talk about night fishing a lot, but a lot of people don't want to commit to full-blown night fishing. So here's a trick to get yourself fired up about night fishing, to get more proficient with night fishing, but also to just add it to the fishing you're already doing. just get there 2 or 3 hours before daylight. Use that as your night fishing, and then you get your night fishing into daytime fishing. Don't use a light as much as you can, because then your night vision will adjust. Now, I'm not going to lie, I do love these popping style frogs. And so let me just tell you something. For the pointed nose frogs like this, I'm throwing this thing for power fishing. Just remember, the point is more power and the popper is off peak. What I mean by off peak is look at your feeding times, and when the fish slow down, throw that popper, because you'll throw it up there and just plop, plop, and stop. So if the fish are slow, you don't see them waking around, you don't see nervous water, you see the wading birds are up in the trees, or they got their neck tucked in with their foot tucked in, they're not feeding. If the world is not actively feeding, slow it down and go with one of these poppers. And when I fish these popper frogs this time of year, especially over wood and open water, I'm more trying to imitate a brim or a shad. So I'm going to go with these blue-green back with a white belly. When I'm throwing this type of frog, especially early, I want that thing to have a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to throw something bright. The only time I'm not going to throw something bright is at night, except for a full moon, because a full moon really shows this thing. So I just throw something bright, except at night. At night, I throw something really dark. And I fish this thing just like a topwater, except it doesn't have treble hooks. So it goes through everything. You throw it up in a treetop and work it out of there. And they're going to be super shallow. You can even throw it on the bank and drag it in. That pre-dawn, throw it on the bank, drag it into the water thing is unbelievably deadly. And I got to figure out a way to film that, or just go out and do it, hook some fish, turn the camera on and show it to you guys, and then recreate what happened after daylight. I think I'll do that. You guys comment in the comment section below if something like that would be of interest to you. But a loop knot on a pointed nose frog, tie a standard clench knot to this type of frog, and this one's great for skipping under docks as well. I actually like this one under docks better, because again, I want it to stay in the strike zone a little bit longer. But let me get to the staple of my summertime fishing, okay? And again, this is going to be one area where I tend to disagree with Gene a little bit, but not a lot, okay? I don't necessarily fish a swim jig or a specific type of jig. I kind of go with a spade jig. And what I mean by the spade jig is it's these ones that it's technically a structure jig head, but it acts a little bit like a football jig, and it acts a little bit like a swim jig. But what I like about it is with that broader head, and when I fan that skirt out, when I'm reeling it in, because every jig is a swim jig, okay? When I'm reeling it in, it's got a little bit more wobble to it. Now, one of my favorite trailers is that trailer right there. That is a Gary Yamamoto flapping hog. As you can tell here, it's summertime. I'm pretty well stacked up with Yamamoto in my grab and go section. But that flapping hog, what I like to do with that thing is I literally like to take it out of the pack, and I rebait these. What I mean by that is I'll Texas rig this first, and after I tear the nose up, I'll save it. I'll bite it off right there in front of those two legs, just like that, and then use that as my jig trailer, and then literally just thread that onto my jig. The other thing that I like to do is I like to mix it up. If I'm moving it or dragging it, I don't want a buoyant skirt. If I'm reeling it, I don't want a buoyant skirt. And I like this one here because it creates a lot of action. I also like the Yamamoto Zako, either the swim type with the paddle tail or the straight tail as a jig trailer. So I use those, and I save those after I tear them up, fishing them Texas rig or just fishing them weightless, and I reuse those as jig trailers. But I'll tell you something, guys. I came across this a little while ago. I got to give credit where credit's due. My buddy Jody Queen is a big-time Z-Man fisherman, so he turned me on to this series of baits, and then I started messing around with them. So this Pro Crawl Z right there, that Pro Crawl Z is an absolute killer for rigging it as a jig trailer. Now, I like it Texas rig, but I also like the fact that this thing is bulky, it's hollow, and then literally all you do is you just go in, and because it's a Last Tech, you kind of go up a little further than you normally would so you can bunch it up on the hook. Smash that thing up right there, and that right there is super sexy, deadly. I generally, this time of year, like to trim my skirt off where it's only about halfway between where it naturally goes and the tip. What that does, or the tip of the weed guard, what that does is it makes that skirt flare out a little more. So even when you don't have the living rubber skirts, which I am a big fan of the living rubber skirts, but even when you don't have the living rubber skirts, if you cut those down, think about a spiked haircut, right? When you cut it shorter, it sticks up easier. When you cut that down to about right there, when you throw that thing, it just lays down, and when you stop it, it sticks out. When you set it on the bottom, it sticks out, and all those skirt legs are moving, And when you just look at that thing just from holding it, right, it's just really shimmery. You take off a little bit and it changes the action. But why I like the Z-Man TRD crawls is if I'm fishing off peak, but I want to be on bottom because I see those fish on the graph, or I just don't see any up shallow and I'm trying to move out deeper, that thing is going to stand up just like that. And those claws are going to pop up into the defensive posture. If I decide I don't want the claws, I just clip the claws off and it stands up almost like a TRD, right? And it looks like a crawfish that no longer has its pinchers, so it's defenseless. Now, then when I decide to reel this thing in, just like I said with a football jig, when you reel that thing in, that head tends to search a little bit back and forth, and it gives it a little bit more wobble, and it gives it a little bit more action both to the skirt and to the legs. So guys, listen, if you don't fish a jig for bass fishing, I don't know what to tell you, because honestly, this is year-round, unbelievable effective lure. Skip it, hop it, pop it, drag it, let it sit, but literally don't overlook swimming it. And when I say swim it, throw it out, let it hit the bottom, pick it up about a crank and just slow reel it until it hits the bottom, and then just raise your rod tip a little bit and speed up a little bit until you're just constantly kind of going over and ticking whatever's just off the bottom. Now, these things work so good. You skip them under docks, you throw them up on the bank, drag them into the water. Honestly, a jig alone could be a top, middle, and bottom of the water column. That's why it's so effective in the summertime. Although it's effective year round. But if you're not throwing this right now, especially when about 10:30, 11 o'clock, depending on where you live and how fast the water temperature gets up, or if you've got current flow or not have current flow, you're going to want to get out a little deeper. And that's why I say shallow to deep. Sunrise to dark, okay? Shallow to deep. Shallow to dark. I mean, shallow to deep. Sunrise to dark. Just remember that. And basically, you start shallow sunrise. The T is too dark, and you start working your way out. And honestly, what I usually try to do is find an area and divide it into a third, and then divide that like a creek arm into thirds. Focus on a third, and then divide it in thirds and focus on that third of a third, and just really dissect it. If I'm going to pre-fish an area for a tournament, now that I'm really getting in the right mindset, I would do that rule of thirds, and I would give each third a day if I had 3 days of pre-fishing. We'll talk about that in another video. But guys, listen, I wanted to bring this video to you because I'm sitting here getting ready going, oh my gosh, I got to preparation is one of the 60-30-10 rules. So I'm putting the right stuff in my box. Why don't I tell you guys about it, right? So anyway, jig. Now, last but not least, when you get super deep and you have to catch them, I've got 2 baits, okay? I've got 2 baits. A lizard, which I already have packed up in my truck, and this recent deal. And I'm a big worm guy just like Gene is, but what I like about the lizard is they stand up on their end a little better, and they're a do-nothing bait. With the worm, they kind of lay flat and you can drag them, but they only have action on the way down or when you hop them and pop them. And a lot of times when it's summertime and the weather is hot, those bass are a little more lethargic. So you need to put something in their face that just kind of, you know, it's kind of undulates, right? It kind of like sexily just moves around and says, hey, big boy, why don't you come over here and get, you know, that. Anyway, I'll shut up now about that. But listen, this right here is freaking deadly. It's this Z-Man Mag Fatty Z. I got turned on to this by Jody Queen. I got to tell you, man, this thing is so freaking lively. I mean, just look at it just shaking in my hand. But I Texas rigged this thing, put a weight on it. I don't peg it in open water, and I do peg it in grass. So open water, no peg. Grass, I peg it. But man, you throw that thing out there, and it works just as good as your standard big worm. And I'm a big worm guy, don't get me wrong. But it has a lot more action. So if I'm power fishing, I'm going to fish a big power worm. If I'm off-peak fishing and I'm really just pinpoint dragging it through a treetop, through a laydown, through a brush pile or something like that, I like this buoyant bait that is going to stand up, and it's going to have some action with me doing nothing but shaking my rod tip. And then again, I've already done videos before where after I tear these up, I cut them off and I use that piece right there for a shaky head. Shaky head is really not my go-to this time of year. If I'm going to go to a shaky head, I'm going to go all the way to a Ned, but I'm not doing Ned rigs right now. Try to avoid Ned rigs. You guys know my love-hate relationship with those. But now I'm going to go to the bait that if you don't want to do any of those, or if you said, okay, man, I already know about all of those, what's your go-to? This is the end. This is the bonus. This is the bonus at the end. So I talked about the 3 lures and techniques that you saw in the thumbnail and that you saw in the title. But above and beyond all of that, this bait right here can be substituted for all of them. And it is the Gary Yamamoto Original Senko in this color right here, which is either green with black fleck, green pumpkin, black flake, or black with blue flake. Honestly, I do a little bit of variations here and there, but by and large, around the country, all conditions, all water clarity, clear water, green pumpkin, stained water to muddy water, black, low light, clear water, black. That's pretty much my formula. But a Gary Yamamoto Senko, either wacky rigged or Texas rigged, or more importantly, weightless rigged, you can do the shallow to deep thing with it. Shallow water, you can throw it up there on the bank, drag it in, and they'll eat it, and it fishes really well in skinny water to no water. Texas rigged or weightless rigged, it comes right off the bank. Wacky rig, you can throw it up there and drag it a little bit. Sometimes it hangs up. Wacky rig, you can skip it a little better. So you can do the shallow with the Senko. You can do the intermediate. Throw it up against a brush pile, throw it up against a treetop, and just let it flutter down. And you get to work the whole water column, okay? You might start getting bites at 2 foot when you thought the fish are at 12 feet, and there's a school that you couldn't see on your graph because they were too far away and they're outside of your depth finder cone. So a good search bait is a Senko. And then you get all the way into the deep. I would take the time to go dig up the footage, but I really want to get this video to you guys. I gave my producer one time after we had finished fishing one day a Senko in 23 foot of water, and he was like, "You want me to fish this in 23 foot of water? Give me a weight." I was like, "No, dude. You want to throw it out there and count it down about a foot a second in 23 foot of water. Give it about 25 seconds, and then just slow drag it, just twitch it, and it'll come up and flutter down." And I promise you, I'm seeing the fish on bottom. There's big fish down there. This is what you want to put in their face. Throws that Senko out, 9 pounds, 15 ounces. And I've caught 100 fish over 8 pounds easily, bunches of 10s by doing this exact thing. A weightless Senko, you could forget everything I just said. You could throw it shallow, you could throw it intermediate, you could throw it deep. It is your go-to all around. So technically this video is your 4 best baits, your 4 best techniques for catching fish. I wanted to tell you about 3 different ones for shallow. The reason back the jake bait, the frogs, and the Senko, because guys, shallow water, early morning, shallow water at night, shallow water after dark is the way to go, because they go shallow to deep, and then they go deep to shallow after dark. It just goes backwards. And then that's why they're shallow at daylight, because at dark they start to work back deep to shallow, and the whole loop just starts over again. That is why I'm a big fan of shallow water fishing. That is why I'm a big fan of night fishing. And this is a great way to get out there if you've got a cheap kayak, if you don't have a depth finder, if you don't have a lot of fancy things. One thing Gene talked about in that video is he likes whopper ploppers when there's wind. This one more thing, I'm going to kind of throw a little extra information to you, at you. I actually caught a 9-pound bass 6 feet from Gene one time when I was throwing a whopper plopper, and he's like, "Man, I think it's too slick to throw a whopper plopper." And I was like, "No, I throw the bigger whopper ploppers, the more choppy it is. And if it gets intermediate, I go to the intermediate. And when there's almost none, I just drop down to like the 90 size." And that's what I did. And I caught a really big fish. So with the whopper plopper, I don't disagree with him. But what I do say is I use the bigger ones when it's super windy. I use the intermediate when it's slightly windy or choppy and just a riffle. And then I use the smaller ones when it's slicked out. And they'll catch fish in all conditions. But I'm back to the whole thing with the jerkbait. Now you're talking about a treble hook lure. Now you're talking about hanging up more. Now you're talking about the thing wrapping up in grass. So the Senko is the easiest, most versatile, most effective. The jig is universally, it's right there with the Senko. You can throw it in all different conditions. You can throw it up shallow. You can swim it. You can do all of those things. I just think the Senko is easier to fish and catch more fish on. So if I'm going to give you the 4-1-1 on how to get it done, I got to tell you kind of incrementally which ones I think are going to make you more successful. Don't forget the jake bait. Definitely tie on a jig, and don't forget to swim it. It's not just a hop and pop, stroke it, or drag it lure. It is a brim or bait fish imitation when you're swimming it back in. And then, guys, the Mag Fatty Z, fish deep, fish slow, fish to where it's standing up and moving. Take advantage of that Elastec. Play around with your jig trailers, whether you get the thump from a paddle tail, the action from a stand-up crawl, or just the bulk from like the flapping hog, to where they feel that and they taste that salt when they pick it up if you're going to let it sit dead still. Yeah, man. Those are my 3 favorite techniques. They're what I'm packing up right now to go out for a summertime fishing trip. I think you should do the same thing. So guys, listen, I'm about to fire this workshop up to start doing a lot more videos out here. I do a lot of tinkering and rigging, and I don't know why I've never shared that stuff. I wrote about it in my book. I talk about it when I've got the video in my hand, or when I've got the product in my hand. Why don't I just show you how to do it over here at the workbench, right? So anyway, hope you guys like this video. Leave a comment in the comment section below if you, give me some feedback on this shop talk, because I think this could be a huge part of this knucklehead family. Just want to know what your thoughts are. So anyway, leave a comment, smash that thumbs up. Again, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so far, and turn on that notification bell so you'll know each and every time this knucklehead releases a new video.